It is officially March Madness time for the St. John's Red Storm. They are now in the NCAA ticket, got their ticket punched, got to know where they're going on Selection Sunday. They'll be the number 2 seed out in the West Regional. And we're going to talk about the Johnnies, what they can do in the NCAA tournament with the great St. John's beat writer for the New York Post, my guy Zach Braziller, who joins me now. Zach, what's going on? Are you okay? Because this is a busy time for you. Not a lot of rest, watching a lot of basketball, which isn't a bad thing, but how are you doing after Selection Sunday?
I'm good. I'm good.
That's
Um, it's fun time. Busy but fun. I don't think it was a great draw. I don't think it was an awful draw.
mm,
Um, I like their, I don't think Kansas or Arkansas, whoever wins that game, I think they'll beat that team. And then it gets really tough. I mean, probably Texas Tech in the Sweet 16, potentially Florida in the Elite Eight. Those are really good teams. So it's not like I think they would have been better off in the South where they would have dealt with an injured Iowa State team in the Sweet 16 and then, an Auburn team possibly in the Elite Eight that's not playing great right now. But hey, you, you want to get to a Final Four, you're gonna have to beat some really good teams.
hey,
So
that
um,
that is true. That is a good point. And look, I think at the beginning of this year, you and I have talked a lot of St. John's basketball. I think you told me that you thought they could get a top 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. They end up getting the number 2 seed in the West region. You said you thought they might have gone to the South. Do you like their draw in the West region? Did you think they would go elsewhere? You thought it could be the South. Is this a good place for St. John's to be as they start off their journey to try to win a national championship?
yeah, I thought the South just because they're the last number 2 seed and Auburn is the overall top seed. I thought that made more sense. Committee did some weird stuff. I'm sure we'll get to it later with for some reason putting North Carolina in and giving Louisville an 8 seed home court advantage and all that stuff. Um, but yeah, look, I don't think it's I think they could have had a worse draw. I mean, they could have had a Gonzaga in the second round or something. Um, but I don't think it's a great draw either. I think Tech's like a they play Tex Tech in the Sweet 16. I think that's a toss-up game. Um, I think those are two very evenly matched teams, and right now Florida's playing great. And Florida's playing as well as anyone in the country. They just won the SEC tournament. They've won at Alabama. They've won at Auburn. They have the former Iona star Walter Clayton Jr., who Pitino tried to bring to St. John's. So I that second weekend is going to be some really tough games. But look, you take one game at a time. You try to get to your first Sweet 16 since 1999, and then see what happens.
Yeah, got to take it one game at a time. And the first game up for the Johnnies will be against Omaha. What do you know about them as an opponent? We know the Johnnies will be heavily favored in that one, but what do you know about their first round opponent?
Well, yeah, St. John's is an 18 and a half point favorite. Omaha can shoot the three. They have a lumbering big man. Um, it's a game like if St. John's does what it's supposed to do, it probably shouldn't sweat. Um, you know, the I think this is a game they're gonna I think the second round game, obviously, with whether it's out Arkansas and Calipari or Kansas and Bill Self, will obviously be a much bigger test than this first one. I would think this first one they'll take care of business here and win pretty handily. Um, there's some other teams I think that might have created more trouble for them, like a Robert Morris who plays a really tough defensive style. It might have been a tougher matchup than this. I think this is a team St. John should take care of pretty easily.
Zach, we've talked about this team all season and the mindset, and they've taken along with their head coach and Rick Pitino, and they've exceeded expectations this season, and they won the Big East regular season title. They won the Big East tournament title. What's the mindset of this team right now as they try to embark and make a deep run in this NCAA tournament?
Yeah, I mean the thing that you've liked all year about this team is their focus and their maturity. They haven't let the hype get to their heads. They haven't let the winning, distract them. And you saw it when they had that 10-game win streak and they lose one game and then they just come back and start winning again. They clinch the Big East regular season title and they come back and they win the Big East tournament. Um, Now they have 5 days off before the NCAA starts. So I'm sure starting tomorrow, Rick's going to be like, you guys haven't accomplished anything, that it's back to work. And, you have a lot of guys where this is it for them in college. Aaron Scott, Kadari Richmond, Davon Smith, possibly RJ Lewis. So this is their last chance, you know. And a lot of these guys have never even played in the NCAA tournament. Zuby Ejiofor did, but didn't really play at Kansas. Kadari Richmond did it early in his career, but didn't really have a big role. So this is kind of all new for them, and this is an opportunity they want to take advantage of. So I think while they're thrilled and there's still kind of the afterglow of the Big East tournament, I think by as we get closer to the game that the focus will turn and they'll understand like one bad night could end our year. And it's just been this magical season that they don't want to end, and it's going to get hammered into them that there's this is now it. You can't slip up. You can't be asleep. You gotta take care of business against every game. You have to take care of business. You can't take anyone lightly, and they haven't all year. So I think that bodes well for them on Thursday.
You brought up something I wanted to ask you about, which is when you look at this roster, there isn't a lot of guys with NCAA tournament experience. We know the experience that Coach Pitino has and the leadership he has in that regard. Do you think the lack of experience with this St. John's roster in terms of the NCAA tournament can be a factor in terms of them not being able to make a deep run in this tournament?
I think it's overrated. Um, they just played a one and done tournament in the Big East, and they seem to handle that fine. Um, and look, they're playing a team that has no NCAA tournament experience. In the second round, they'll be playing, you know, if it's Arkansas, they don't really have a lot of guys with NCAA tournament experience. It still comes down to in between the lines and what happens on the court. I think that tournament stuff is a bit overrated, and they have experienced guys who've handled success well, and I think that's more important than like maybe guys who've been through it before.
Who's in your eyes is the X factor? We know RJ Lewis has been a big time player for them all season long, Big East Player of the Year this year. Is there a guy you look at the X factor that's got to step up and bring his A game here in this national tournament?
It's Zuby Ejiofor. There's no doubt. To me, he's been their MVP all season just because of what he brings to them on both ends as the leading offensive rebounder in the country. He's really their vocal leader. He was absolutely awesome in the Big East tournament, and they need him to stay out of foul trouble. They're not the same team without him, and that to me is a big thing. They could afford R.J. Lewis getting in foul trouble. They could afford Kadari Richmond or Davon Smith because they have other options there. There's a big drop off when Zuby's not on the court, and that's not necessarily a knock on any other guys. It's just he's played at such a high level. They need him out there for 30 plus minutes. They need him to play well as we go deeper into this tournament. So I mean, he's to me he's the guy. He's got to play well. He's got to stay on the floor for them to have a big tournament.
All right, before I'm going to get off St. John's just for a quick second because I know you watch Selection Sunday, very closely, and you said the committee did some strange things, Zach, and I do agree with you in one of them in UNC getting in this tournament. 1-12 in quad one. How'd they get in? Make it make sense for me with UNC. How did UNC get in? Is it just because the brand is strong here with the Tar Heels?
I mean, the resume metrics were better than other teams, I guess, in the bubble conversation. That's kind of what they said. But my issue is last year you had Big East teams like Seton Hall, Providence, and St. John's who didn't get in. And the reason was, well, they don't have enough good wins. They don't have enough wins over teams in the tournament. Well, North Carolina doesn't have anything, has less than those teams did last year, and they're in. So the problem I have with the committee is there's inconsistency. And that's part of the problem when you have a different chair every year and you have different people on the committee every year that there's a moving target. I was glad to see Xavier got in. I thought they deserved it. I was very surprised West Virginia didn't get in. And then there's some other things like Louisville's an 8 seed and they get home games on the first weekend. I
Yeah.
mean, the only teams that are supposed to get kind of protected that way are top four seeds. Now, Maryland's a top four seed and they got sent out to Seattle or whatever. Meanwhile, Arizona's a 4 seed and they got sent to Providence. So there's a lot of stuff they did that was very weird. Like Auburn's got to basically play a road game in the second round
Yeah.
if Bill beats Creighton. It just doesn't make a lot of what they did really doesn't make a whole lot of sense with North Carolina at the top of the list.
Yeah, no, Auburn, you just mentioned there, they could be playing Louisville and Lexington in the second round. That's going to be rough if that happens. But we'll see what happens with the bracket. Now, in terms of what happens with the bracket, Zach, anytime it comes to college basketball, college football, you know I got to ask you what your picks are. You've been working hard. You've dove into the bracket. You've already made your picks. Mark Hale, our wonderful deputy editor, is probably going to hate on these picks, but
course.
who do you have? He said, of course. Who do you have going to the Final Four and winning the whole thing? What do you have?
Um, so I have Florida over St. John's in the West in the Elite Eight, Duke over BYU, um, Michigan State, and what was the last one? Duke, Michigan State, Gonzaga. Sorry, Gonzaga. I have Gonzaga knocking off Houston in the second round and going to the Final Four. I think Duke's the best team. I'm going to pick Duke to win it all. Boring, I know, but I think Cooper Flagg's a generational player. They have other guys who I think are going to be really good NBA players. They've been incredible all year. I think Duke's the best team. I will go. I will go Duke winning it all with Florida, Gonzaga, Duke, and Michigan State.
Florida, Gonzaga, Duke, Michigan State, Duke winning it all. And what Zach did there with those picks, he disappointed all in New York. Everybody thought you were going to pick St.
Well,
John's out here, Mr. Brazilla.
hey, I'm like a jinx. So if I picked St. John's, they're definitely not going to the Final Four. So someone said, "Oh, you let me down." I said, "Well, I actually did you a favor because if I picked St. John's to go to the Final Four, they definitely wouldn't make it. So I'm actually helping St. John's fans. Think
All right,
about that."
you might be right about that. Last thing before we get you out of here, if St. John's is to make a Final Four run, because you have them going to the Elite Eight, if they are to make a Final Four run, what needs to happen? What level do you need to see them play at that maybe we haven't seen this year? What needs to happen for St. John's to get to the Final Four?
I mean, we've seen the UConn home game we saw it. I thought the second half of Creighton we saw it. That level is good enough to get to a Final Four. To me, that second half against Creighton yesterday was incredible basketball. 57 points, 71% from the field. They made 14 shots in a row at one point. That was Final Four level basketball, and that's the kind of way that they're going to have to play if they're going to beat a Texas Tech, a Florida. I'm not saying they have to shoot 71%, but that kind of level of basketball. And this week, I think they get through the first weekend. That second weekend, Texas Tech and probably Florida, what you're looking at, they're gonna have to play really well, and they're gonna they can't kind of sleepwalk early and find themselves in a 25 hole. That's the kind those teams you don't climb out of those holes. You can do it against Marquette or some of these Big East teams. You don't do it against a Texas Tech or a Florida. So I think avoiding that like 6 7 minute lapse that we've seen a few times is something they really need to figure out.
We'll see if they can do it. Zach and I have been talking Johnny's basketball all season long. I do not think we would have been sitting. They thought that we'd be sitting here in March talking about the fact that they legitimately have a chance to make it to the Final Four, even though Zach did not pick them. That is Zach Braziller, the great St. John's beat writer for the New York Post, with us here, giving us some time after the selections on Selection Sunday. Zach, it is going to be a busy week for you. Hopefully, busy next couple of weeks for you. We will talk soon. We'll be doing a lot more of these discussions around the Johnnies. Thank you, man.
All right, buddy. Have a good one.
You too.